All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, the news that USC fired Clay Helton today is not a shocker, but the timing of it is. USC Athletic Director Mike Bond made the announcement this afternoon that the school had moved on from Helton. This came on the heels of USC's shocking 42-28 loss at home this past Saturday night to Stanford. The thing was, it was like typically when you see a coach get fired mid-season, typically, they have a losing record that year. Generally, they weren't living up to expectations. But after the second week, you really got that feeling. And the thing was, honestly, just like the title of this podcast, Clay Helton was always on borrowed time at USC because he was never the guy that the people there wanted. Remember, Clay Helton was the interim head coach for the bowl game back in 2013 after Ed Orgeron left after he took over midseason for Lane Kiffin, who got fired. And that was just to keep the seat warm for Steve Sarkisian. Steve Sarkisian came in, and Steve Sarkisian had his off the field issues at USC. Uh, Clay Helton got the job like midway through the 2015 season. And, you had a USC team that was respectable that year. I mean, they made the conference championship game. They won the Pac 12 South. And, he was rewarded to be the head coach for 2016. But nonetheless, no matter what Clay Helton did, it was never going to be good enough at USC. You go back to 2016, the men of Troy went 10-3. They had a Rose Bowl bid. They won the Rose Bowl. They upset Penn State in that game. They came back for 2017. The expectations were high. They began the year ranked number 4. They went 11-3. They won the Pac-12, but they were blown out by Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl that year. And even going back to 2017, every single time that USC lost a game, go to Twitter. A lot of people wanted Helton gone. It did not help his case in 2018 when they went 5-7, but he was able to keep his job. 2019 was up and down as they went 8-5. Last year, USC was 5-0 in a shortened regular season. They lost a Pac-12 championship game, and they decided not to go to a bowl game. But even this year, going back to SC's first game of the season, they beat San Jose State at home by the score of 30-7. But if you listen to a lot of people talk about that game, you would think that you would have thought that USC lost that game. The Stanford game is always a big game to the alums of both schools. It's generally the first conference game each year for both the USC and Stanford. And you figure you had a lot of alums, you got a lot of boosters, and you have a lot of very important people sitting in the stands watching that game. And for SC to lose by 2 touchdowns at home, and it really wasn't even that close, to a Stanford team that just went on the road and got beat and beat pretty bad by a K-State team that's not even in the upper tier of teams in the Big 12 conference, that did not sit well with a lot of people. And honestly, I think this was a decision that Mike Bond didn't want to make. But the bottom line is the people that, sign his checks, a la the boosters, they had enough. And it's one of those where, Helton does have a Pac-12 title on his resume. He does have a Rose Bowl win on his resume. But again, he was never the guy that people wanted there at USC. I look at Clay Helton. It's that Wayne Fontes syndrome. And if anybody remembers when Wayne Fontes was the head coach of the Detroit Lions, no pun intended, because the hat is on my head. But the thing was, Wayne Fontes was always on a hot seat. And then finally, after the 96 season, he did get fired. So it's one of those where, he was able to win, but his wins weren't good enough. And the thing is this, a lot of people that support this program want USC to get back to what it was under Pete Carroll. And I could understand totally where people are coming from, because typically when you think of USC football, they don't have to go out there and beg the top tier recruits on the West Coast, especially in Southern California, to come don the maroon and gold at SC. But the thing is, a lot of things have changed. You look at Oregon, who has really beefed up their recruiting. They come down into California and they get top tier guys. UCLA is finally turning things around under Chip Kelly. You think about some of the East Coast teams, a la Alabama, who has been able to come west and get some of those talented kids on the West Coast to come east and play for Alabama. So that just, it just lets you know how things have changed. What USC has to do is they have to get back to what they did best in the Pete Carroll era, the John Robinson era, the John McKay era, and that is basically put a blanket over the state of California, get those guys, the top tier guys they want. And the thing is, it's not like USC does not have the alums to help them in this. When you think about USC and not just the college football Hall of Famers, but the pro football Hall of Famers that are always involved in this program that are willing to work. You always see a Marcus Allen around this program. You always see a Ronnie Lott. You think about some of the other great players that have played for USC that have gone on to have Hall of Fame careers, a la Anthony Munoz. So it's one of those where, SC, they want to get back to that. And, Mike Bond was brought in from Cincinnati as their athletic director several years ago to do just the thing. And he has worked with Helton over the years. But the bottom line is USC for a very long time has not had those impact players on the defensive side of the ball. Even like their skill position players that they've gotten, they haven't gone on to make the impact in the NFL that we saw under Pete Carroll. And that, tells a lot about a program because guys are going to see those guys go to the next level and have success. And they're going to say, hey, well, you know what? I want to come there and play ball. And we saw that factory just continue churning on when Pete Carroll was there. You had the Reggie Bushes of the world. You had the Dwayne Jarrett's of the world. You had the Mark Sanchez's of the world, the Carson Palmers of the world. But on the flip side, you had a Troy Polamalu. You had a Ray Mawaluga, in the litany of players that was there. But nonetheless, this is what SC needs to get back to, and they need to get them a coach. And I'm sure they're going to find a coach that embodies that. And I think it's a situation for USC. They want to go out there and they want to get a big name, a big hire that's going to not only wow the fan base, wow the alumni, but also send a message to the other teams in the Pac 12. Because when you think about the Pac 12, even back when it was the Pac 8 and, of course, the Pac 10, it was basically USC and everybody else. And this is something that we're not seeing from SC right now. And I think it's a situation where USC wants to get back to what they were doing, kind of like what Alabama did when they hired Nick Saban. We're tired of hiring guys that are just there to keep the seat warm and give them a chance. No, we want a guy who's going to knock this thing out of the park, put us back to where we were. And I think SC wants to go back to those days when they were dominating with student body right, when Tommy Trojan was consistently riding Traveler, and of course he still is going to do that nonetheless, but exciting 90,000 people at the Coliseum, putting fear in all of those other teams in the conference, going across country and facing the superior teams from other conferences and dominating them. And that's what USC definitely wants to get back to. So I think some names that you're going to hear thrown around as far as who's going to be the next coach at USC. Number one is Luke Fickell, who is the current head coach at Cincinnati. And you look at the job that he's done there, but also Mike Bond, the current athletic director at USC, was his former boss at Cincinnati. And I know that Cincinnati going to the Big 12 conference is definitely going to help them money wise. But even with that, they're not going to have the money that that USC is going to have. USC is going to throw the vault at him if he wanted that job. Brian Harsin, the current head coach at Auburn, does have West Coast ties. You think about the job that he did coming into Boise State after Chris Peterson, and he kept the machinery going for a very long time. He's in his first year as the head coach at Auburn, but he does have West Coast ties, and he is from the state of Idaho. And if anybody knew how to succeed on the West Coast, it would be a Brian Harson. A lot of people are talking about this man right here, and he's trending on Twitter right now because of it. Urban Meyer. And of course, I think the name Urban Meyer really sparked a little bit more due to the fact that everybody saw his debut in the NFL yesterday as the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And honestly, it was right on cue because I really don't see Urban Meyer having a lot of success in the NFL with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's a college coach, he belongs in college. And it's one of those where, you know what, maybe it's a situation where we have a Bobby Petrino where he exits stage right. Um, Prior to the end of the season with the Jags. We'll have to wait and see. But nonetheless, you look at it, Urban Meyer, and you know that he won a national championship at Ohio State. You know that he won a national championship at Florida, but he also did have success out west because he led Utah to an undefeated season, which is what led to him getting the Florida job in the first place. So, we know what Urban Meyer can do. It's a situation where he got a ton of money from the Jags to be their head coach because it was something that he didn't do. I guarantee you, USC is going to throw the bank at him if he wanted this job. Another name that you could possibly hear is Bill O'Brien. He's currently an assistant coach on offense with Alabama, and O'Brien did have some success in his brief time as the head coach of Penn State. And remember, O'Brien took over a program that was in the middle of some heavy sanctions, and they were very close to the death penalty. They were probably as close to the death penalty as you could be. But nonetheless, he was able to get a winning record in 2 years at Happy Valley before he left to become the head coach of the Houston Texans. It's one of those things where typically when coaches do have some success, but it's not that great success. And then they go work with Nick Saban, and it's a situation where, you know what, they can come back and be a little bit better. We saw it with Lane Kiffin, another former USC head coach who is now the head man at Ole Miss, and prior to that, Florida Atlantic. I know that Steve Sarkisian and Texas took it on the chin this past week at Arkansas, but I think he is the right guy for the job at Texas. And I think him being around Nick Saban at Alabama is going to help him turn it around. So maybe a guy like Bill O'Brien could be in that mix as well. But nonetheless, I think it's a situation where it's going to be a big name. It's going to be somebody where it's going to wow people because this is what USC is all about. USC is looking for that sizzle. And it's a situation for Clay Helton. Clay Helton walked into a buzzsaw. The bottom line is he won games, but like I said, he didn't win the big games. And I think the icing on the cake was the fact that they got blown out by Stanford. The only way that I think Clay Helton would have avoided this season, SC would have had to go at least 10-2 and win the Pac-12 conference and get to a BCS bowl. I think that would have been the only way. And myself, heading into the season, I did pick USC to win the Pac-12, but starting off with a loss at home to Stanford is not going to cut it. So we're going to see where this team goes. I think that Mike Bond is going to take his time to find a hire, the right hire, because this is going to be the hire that, basically dictates what he can and cannot do as an athletic director at USC. Because I guarantee you this, if Mike Bond hires the wrong guy now, since he didn't hire Clay Helton before, but if he goes out there and hires the wrong guy now, the next time that USC makes a coaching change, if they have to fire a head coach, Bond is going with him as well. So Bond definitely wants to go out there and hire the right guy for this job. So it's time to roll up your sleeves. If you're, part of this football administration in Los Angeles, go out there, scour the nation, do what you got to do. But has to be the right hire. We see what Oregon's doing in the Pac-12 North. We see how UCLA is coming on right now with Chip Kelly. And the last thing that USC wants is to take a back seat to UCLA in Los Angeles when it comes to football. So SC is not thrilled about what is going on. I'm not surprised that Clay Helton has been removed. He did have a solid time tenure with USC, but the thing was, Solid wasn't good enough to save his job. Obviously, he didn't make those impact moves to take this program to the next level. And I guarantee you, Mike Bond is definitely going to go out there and find the next head coach that will. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. As always, there is a sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Special shout out to a special friend of mine tonight that gave me a little bit of advice on tonight's podcast, on tonight's live. And I want to shout out that bestie. And if she's listening out there, I'm happy. I hope you're happy with the advice that you gave me, and I hope you're happy that I listened to your advice. And as always, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.